Income Flip. Today we've got Mark Willis with us, who is a CFP. He helps business owners like us figure out how we can make more money out of our businesses and protect our money. And Mark, welcome to the Income Flip, man. We were talking a little bit offline about the recent book you wrote, so we're going to deep dive a little bit on that. But I wanna understand you. Like, how did you get into this world of helping business owners protect their wealth, protect their assets, make more money? Like, I'd love to unpack that a little bit.
It's a fun journey. It's not what I expected I'd be doing with my life. I found myself not really even aware of financial anything as I graduated from graduate school. So you think you're all ready to be an adult if you make it through your master's degree. But 2008 was happening right at the time I was getting my tassels, and nobody was hiring, and so I had to figure out how I was going to scratch together, six figures to pay off my student loans at the same time. And so I was, for the first time, faced with having to balance my own budget and just pay attention to this thing called money. And so I was working for a property management firm, which got me exposed to real estate on the ground floor, literally, actually under the ground floor. My first day on the job. My first day on the job was, yes, they handed me a shop vac and told me to go underneath the broken elevator and pull out whatever I found. So that was I call it my ego busting moment after my fancy master's degree, whatever, and they're handing me, the dirtiest job they could find, I guess. So all things considered, it was a great experience, probably the best learning I could have had at that moment. And I also worked alongside that with some other side jobs, working a restaurant, I worked for a CPA firm as well. And at that moment, I realized, wow, there is this universe of this thing called money that if those that understand it profit from it, those that don't understand it will always be subject to it. And so I started hearing and listening over to some of the CPA's calls. She was making phone calls to her clients. It just so happened this was in the fallout of 2008. So my first experience of financial planning.
Yes. A lot of tough calls, I can imagine.
You see where I'm going here. So she would make those calls. I'm sorry, Mr. 63-year-old. I'm sorry, but I just lost you a third of your life savings. You're right about ready to retire. It was a gut-wrenching experience. I almost left the financial industry and said no more. But happily, I was able to stumble across some strategies, both for myself and then later for my own clients as I started my firm, Lake Growth Financial Services, that have helped me and my clients and our family tree just transform where we can go and to do it in a way that creates sanity instead of more and more insanity, which there's plenty of insanity in our world today, but the concept of balance and abundance and sanity itself is a very rare commodity today.
Mark, as you reflect on all the business owners that you've spoken to over the years, what are some of the habits of the people that are winning with money? What are some of the habits or lack thereof of the people that are losing with money? Like what can you kind of share with the audience?
There's a lot there. We could probably unpack that for hours or even over a week-long seminar. One thing that strikes me is this idea of diversification. It's at first talked about as a virtue. And I get it. It can be helpful to diversify. I understand the importance there. You don't want to just put all of your eggs in one basket. But what about if you put all of your eggs in 12 baskets and they're all on the same truck? This is how most people diversify. So they diversify by getting a mutual fund or 5 or 6 different mutual funds, but they're all tied to the same correlated asset called the stock market or equities markets. And when the market goes off a cliff, all of those baskets go off with it, and how much good did all that diversification do you? So this is not a problem until it immediately is a problem. So these are people who are probably balancing their checkbook every month, and they're probably saving in their 401k, and they're probably managing their finances well. And most people listening to this are probably doing many of the basic block and tackle, maybe not, but hopefully you've got some basic operations to keep your family afloat or your business afloat. But what I have found is, one, diversification is not what you think it means. We need to put some of your eggs on another truck, meaning a non-correlated asset. Second, And this goes to the book that I recently wrote. It's called The Business Fortress: How to Grow, Protect, and Exit Your Business with Confidence. Specifically for business owners, liquidity is an underrated asset. Mm-hmm. And there's a rate of return, psychologically and monetarily, to liquidity. Now, of course, liquidity just means access to money. And many people think, well, if I have access to it, it's probably in a cash checking account and it's earning zero interest, and what a waste that is. No, it's an incredibly powerful asset. If you have a high liquidity ratio in your business or in your family, and that opportunity comes across your desk to invest in some real estate or a syndication fund, you'll be the one to take advantage of that opportunity. You know, it favors the ones ready to take advantage of it. Opportunity does. Mm-hmm. So I would say liquidity is very much a dismissed asset, and it should be more important in people's perspectives. I honestly say 3 to 6 months expenses is probably not enough, and having an opportunity fund that could be equal to 2 years of your expenses would just give you access to opportunities that the average American has to pass by because they're living on credit cards or they're living on the razor's edge.
I love that. I remember hearing Bill Gates talk about how he was so concerned about the expenses within Microsoft that he actually had a year of cash. I don't know what he has now, right?
Yeah.
A lot. But, in those early days, it was a year of cash to make sure that he could kind of get through any kind of lean times.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to your trucks, what your trucks look like, right? I, over the years, have learned to put our money into 5 trucks, 5 separate trucks. But I'd love to hear yours.
Well, yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear yours too. So this is a good back and forth. I'd love to hear it. There's all sorts of answers to that question. I think the first thing you want to do is start asking yourself questions around verbs and adjectives rather than nouns. Nouns are good. Nouns would be things like brokerage account, checking account, 401k, real estate, annuities. Those are all nouns. But what are the verbs and what are the adjectives that correspond with those nouns? What does your money do when you put it in bucket 1 versus bucket 2, or truck 1 versus truck 2, for example? So what are some of those attributes? Well, again, liquidity might be one. Tax-free access might be another. No penalties to get access to it. Privacy, that's a big one. If you're in the real estate space, we need this money creditor protected and also predator protected. I want this money to be safe from that lawsuit that will come. I hate to say it that way, but in the real estate world, it's not a matter of if, but when there's going to be a papers served at your door, you might say. Somebody's going to slip on that banana peel outside of your rental property or whatever it might be, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Legacy, collateralization. I want to be able to access against my assets as a collateral form, so I can get 2 uses of my money at the same time. We could keep going. I mean, can you think of any other? How about good rate of return? That might be another verb or attribute. Can you think of any others just off the top of your head?
It's interesting. I looked at it, thought about it slightly differently, and this is the adjective, the noun or the verb that you're talking about, right? I was like, okay, well, liquidity certainly.
Yeah.
I was like cash or access to cash as a bucket, right? Real estate as another truck, right? I look at it that way.
I would throw in there to the real estate piece. I might say the words passive income. That's an attribute that a lot of people use real estate for. Also tax advantages and appreciation and of course the step up in basis that comes when you leave it to your heirs. There's all sorts of attributes that only real estate provides. So that's a big one right there. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I love that, right? Because it's all about aligning our thinking or how we each look at the world differently, right? This is how people learn. The third being my business, right? That's another bucket that I look at. Another bucket that I look at is the stock market or index funds, right? That would be a bucket that I'm looking at. And then another one would be the crypto space or today, just kind of what does that look like? Collectibles could be another one, right?
Yep.
And so, if I'm looking at, I've got $100, do I have 20% like one way to think about diversification. I thought this is the way you were going to go. So like, let's talk about this. But one way to look at it would be like 20% in your cash bucket, right? 20% in your stock bucket, 20% in your real estate holdings, 20, right? You could do that so that it kind of adds to the 100%. But I thought you were going to go, because I've seen this too. Hey, can you put like you could diversify within an asset class as well? And you touched on that, right? You could put 100,000 into the index with lots of different ones, but you are putting everything into that one truck that could
That's right.
crash. Right?
It's all 12 baskets on one truck, exactly. And I would even say, again, crypto might have some correlation to the stock market, or at least the tech stocks anyway, at this moment anyway. Now there's some other use cases for crypto possibly, but again, what does each of these trucks help you accomplish? Again, for real estate, maybe it's passive income, maybe it's tax depreciation, maybe it's tax advantages, that sort of thing. How about with stocks? So maybe it's to keep up with inflation. Cash might be for opportunities or emergencies, some sort of contingency fund. You could add to that precious metals or whatever. So that's the key. What is this helping me accomplish? Because I feel like a lot of people, they go through their life and they just start, they get their backpack and they go on their hike. They go through their hike.
And they're just collecting a bunch of shit.
They're collecting. Yeah, exactly. Ooh, pretty rock here, pretty rock there.
Guilty.
Me too, yeah. Or, hey, that pretty Roth IRA over there, that pretty crypto stock, cryptocurrency over there, or that, AI stock over there. And we just start adding, and pretty soon we got this weighed down pack, and we're like, why the heck do we have all this stuff? I would say one of the best things we can all do is just continually ask ourselves, what does this help me accomplish today? And would I make the same decision today that I did back when I bought that Roth IRA or got that credit card or whatever it was? Is it still serving me, or am I just serving my past self by holding on to it? And there's that sunk cost fallacy. And another question would be, are these tied together? So I want non-correlated assets. I want something that when the market crashes, this other thing over here doesn't just survive, it actually gets better. So the great book, Anti-Fragile, Nassim Taleb talks about this. He says, you don't want to just be durable, you want to be anti-fragile. So there's a fragile market, there's a fragile portfolio. If all your money is tied to something that can break as soon as somebody sneezes the wrong way on Wall Street, that's a fragile portfolio. But a durable portfolio is not enough. That's more defensive, you may not be able to grow very much. He says anti-fragile actually becomes better under stress. So do you have a portfolio that actually gets better when things are choppy? Because I don't know about you, Rob, I don't think we're done with volatility yet in this world or in the markets. So how could we actually benefit from the debt we're suffering under today, or the market volatility we're suffering under today? This is the jujitsu of financial planning. How do you actually get better when you're faced with adversity? These are the things that caught my attention because I was suffering under, a truckload of student loan debt and some credit cards, a lot of student loan debt. I was stuck without much of an income in 2008, so and I was watching people lose all their life savings at the very worst time. So I'll tell you, the worst time you can lose something in the market is, we call it the danger zone. It's the 5 years right before you retire and the 5 to 10 years right after you retire. And it's on something you have no control over. The order in which you receive your rates of return in the markets in that 10 to 15 year period can be devastating. In fact, Nature Journal did a study. 85% of deaths are not going up Mount Everest; they're coming down the mountain. Down the mountain. Isn't that interesting? So where is the planting? I
better tell my wife that she's about to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Okay, all right, yeah.
You're gonna be like, hey, babe, it's coming down. You got to worry about.
It's coming down. Why is that? You think the way gravity should be working with you, but interestingly, people, I don't know. I'm definitely no expert here. I remember climbing Mount Fuji, which is easier to do than Mount Kilimanjaro. Good on you to your wife. That's awesome. But it was coming down that I felt like I was going to die. Hard going up, but scary going down. And I would say the same is true with our retirement funds as well in our portfolio. It's easy to face volatility when we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s, when you have an earned income to support you. But when you're fully relying on the distributions of your stocks or your real estate or whatever, and then boom, the government says rent moratoriums, or boom, the market says crash. All of a sudden, you're screwed, and there's not much you can do about it because you still got to eat that year. So your double pain is destroying that compounding, and it can turn a portfolio into an empty bucket, like nitroglycerin right there. It can destroy your success rate. So one thing that I found to be very interesting, back to your question about trucks, of all things, you've mentioned a ton of really great ones, real estate and more. Of all things, a certain form of insurance contracts can also provide some counterbalancing and create an anti-fragile portfolio, especially when you couple it like peanut butter and jelly with real estate. And I don't know if you want to dive deeper into that, but that's been something that we've talked a lot about.
Mm-hmm. Let's dive deeper into that, right? Are you talking about whole life policies? Are you talking about infinite banking through that?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. It's a strategy. It's a referenced tool. Other people on the YouTubes and everything have talked about it. I have found that a certain form of dividend-paying whole life insurance designed, we call it the bank on yourself way. Infinite banking is great, but there's enough people out there who've muddied the waters on what those words mean. There's no IP protection around that phrase, and there's no training per se that's certifying and authorizing what people are doing with your money when you build that policy. So we describe it as bank on yourself to protect the client and protect the information, the intellectual property around what it is. But what is it? It's a little known variation on whole life insurance that acts like a cash alternative. So very briefly, I'll describe this truck, you might say, and why it might actually be a anti-fragile component to your portfolio. So are you familiar with the concept in brief, and would it help your audience to explain it briefly?
Yes, I bought a house using my whole life policy to kind of test that whole process. Yeah. But I'm still a neophyte at it. Yeah. So let's talk about it.
Well, love it, man. I'd love to hear your story on it. It sounds like you have some exposure to it. So if it's designed properly, and I got to say that up front, it's sort of like an airplane. If an airplane is designed improperly, what's it going to do? It's going to crash. But if it's designed properly and you have a pilot that knows what he or she is doing, it flies incredibly well and it gets more efficient every year you keep it. So a whole life policy designed the bank on yourself way does 4 things. TGIF. Okay. First is tons of tax advantages. T. It's accessible with no taxes due. So it's like a liquid Roth IRA, if you will, in essence, in the way it's taxed. And it grows without taxes due every year. This makes it better than, say, a CD or a money market account or a cash savings account. It gets tons of tax advantages in terms of the death benefit. It's income tax-free when you leave it to your family. Second, G stands for guarantees. So there are guarantees of the principal, meaning every year you're always going to see the money you had in there last year. You're never going to have a market crash. And second, the guarantees grow every year. You have a guaranteed increase of your net worth every year. Just imagine how that would feel to have at least this portion of your portfolio growing every year. I get to give my clients that have these policies good news every time I talk to them. Every time. Third is insurance. I stands for insurance. So we're always, contractually speaking, going to leave our family more than we could save for them because it is insurance, and that's how insurance works. And in many ways, that's a pretty rare thing. Unless you're a famous artist or something, very few things become wealthier after you die. And then F stands for financing. This is the big one for a lot of real estate investors or investors, business investors too, and why we wrote the book. You can access the cash value, collateralizing that cash value, borrowing against your cash value to make loans to yourself or for your business or anybody else too. Borrowing against your cash value means the policy will continue to compound uninterrupted on the full policy value as if you had never touched the money. Now, not every policy does this, and there's actually a lot of people who think they have these policies, and we look at the insurance company or the contract that's written, and they're not designed properly. But if they are, imagine how powerful that could be. If you have a $300,000 cash value, I was working with a gentleman, he's in California right now. He put in $300,000 into a policy, immediately was able to borrow a large portion of that to make a rehab and build an ADU on his property. And his policy continues to compound and earn interest on the full cash value. And also, he's renovating, upgrading, converting his property, adding the ADU, and generating an extra $7,500 a month in rent that he wouldn't have otherwise had. So he didn't sacrifice the compounding of his policy's growth, which is middle single digits, 4, 5, 6%.
4 or 5%.
And you're putting also that money to work in your property, which is going to do whatever it's going to appreciate in the cash out refinance opportunity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way we did it was I worked for a wealthy, very savvy, he's just an icon in the industry. It was like Mass Mutual's Agent of the Year for 16, 17 years in a row, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alan Meltzer, right? Just a complete badass in the DMV area. And when I was 26, 25, he was like, "Trust me, Rob, you're gonna thank me," right? So there was the basic disability policy that I got, and then there was this whole life policy, and since then I've gotten others, right?
Yeah.
And I woke up like 20 years later, and I'm like, there's a lot of money in this thing, right? and I never knew like how complicated it would be to access the money, how difficult would it be to access the money. So there was a little river house that had like cropped up, and I was like, I wonder how easy it is to access this money to see if I can use it. And literally I make a phone call, and he's like, "Oh, Rob, it's super easy. You send this document, you could do it all online, like you'll have your money like in a couple days." And it was super easy, right? Like no questions asked.
Well, I was going to say, did you have to show your credit score? Did you have to no, none of that? Okay.
No, like it was like none of it was so easy, right? Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was that we used that to renovate the property, improve the value, create more arbitrage in the rental income, right? And I noticed that policy just kept going up, right? As
amazing.
And the death benefit was, I was like, wow, this is powerful, right? And so you do have to pay the interest payments that are coming in, like that still has to happen, but it was like nominal.
Yeah.
Like nominal.
Yeah.
Right?
Usually it's way below typical market rates for interest. I don't know about, I'd have to look at your particular policy.
It was like 4%. It was 4%.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about 4% against like 8%, 9%, right? Today's rates.
Sure beats a HELOC on your house. So there's so many things. And by the way, for folks listening, again, every policy is designed differently. So, definitely chat with someone who can build these properly. But when you borrow against a policy, there is actually no requirement to repay the interest or the principal. If you didn't pay off that loan or even pay the interest every year, Rob, if you just carried that loan all the way to your grave, they would just deduct that loan balance from your death benefit. Your family would get the net death benefit plus, of course, your real estate.
Tax-free.
Too. Yeah, that's right. Tax-free.
Tax-free, right? Wow. That's why I was like, mind blown.
For folks that are just like, hey, this sounds too good to be true, I will just quickly say, as a certified financial planner, nothing is perfect out there. So whole life policies, they got their costs up front. Usually you try to squeeze the commissions and the death benefit expense. You try to squeeze all those out, but you can't get rid of them entirely. But, it's meant to be a steady, predictable yield. We're not talking triple-digit rates of return. It's meant to be sort of a cash allocation in your portfolio. But the neat thing about it is now you got this big collateral fund, contingency cash that you can drop on a house like you did, Rob. And then, you're taking advantage when banks stop lending. Who's going to be the guy on the courthouse steps to buy the next property? It's going to be you with the liquid money in your policies.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it allowed us to make a quick strategic move easily, and I was like, wow, the asset value went up, the rental value went up, my policy went up. Like I was like, this is such a win. So, and it's interesting. We have not talked at all about it on this podcast so far. So I'm glad you're bringing it up. What other you work with a lot of business owners, right? And you work with a lot of real estate, I would imagine, entrepreneurs, right? What other areas are you typically trying to help them with? When you look under the hood, you might notice certain problems with how they've built their machine, or maybe gaps on how they built their machine. What are some of the areas that you're focused on?
Biggest thing, and again, the reason why we wrote the book, The Business Fortress, David C. Barnett and I wrote this book. You guys can check it out and get a bunch of goodies at newbankingsolution.com. I would say liquidity would be one of those that we talk about in the book, and strategies to helping increase liquidity. But just understanding the basic components of how your business works. You don't have to be a spreadsheet nerd, but if you're going to be in business or a real estate investor, you got to know what a balance sheet is. You got to know some of the basic terms, profit and loss sheet, that sort of thing. Sit down and talk to a professional if you're just allergic to math, but make sure that you have somebody who is in your corner. No one's going to care more about your numbers than you do. So you got to do this sort of at least a little bit to get this under your belt. That would be one. And I would say two, build that exit strategy from day one. Build it like you're planning to sell it from day one. I had a client who, he had a great business. He was running a great restaurant. He was like, it was like Cheers, basically. Think Cheers, okay? Kind of a bar type deal. And he passed away, unfortunately, before he could get it sold. And everyone came there to see him. And he was trying to get it sold, trying to start that conversation with some employees. And then when he went, so did the customers. And so you need that exit plan and a buy-sell agreement as soon as you can. Even if you don't have a business partner, you need some sort of succession plan. Even if it's a couple rental properties, somebody probably should be in the wings to buy it. Unless your spouse is going to just immediately want to be a landlord, you might want to have a buy-sell agreement that can be worked out. And that's just where you and a buddy or a partner or a competitor even has an agreement that they'll buy out your equity with some life insurance. That's one option. You could certainly do it in any other way, but the most efficient way I found is through life insurance. Immediately when I pass away, someone's going to get some money to pay my family, and they get the equity for the equity in the business.
Yeah,
just a couple of different strategies, just some kind of strategy for exiting this business if you're passing away, but also if you're retiring, you need some sort of golden parachute, and that's some strategies I'd talk to a business owner about as well.
Mark, what inspired you to write the book?
I was seeing the people who are really running a giant cash cow business for the banks. They were running it for the banks. The bank was the primary profit taker in their business. And it was such a shame because the business owner was taking all of the risk. They were losing sleep, losing marriages, losing their waistline. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to be privy to the fact that banks are like parasites on a business. They start out by offering you teaser rates. They give you it's like a drug dealer in many ways. And the business of banking is to deal in money. Some people sell hammers and nails and paper clips. Banks sell money, and that profit that they yield off of the hook, line, and sinker to you or to the business owner is the cash that should have stayed in your pocket. It's your reward for taking that risk as an entrepreneur. And so that's what inspired me to write the book. I needed something to say to folks, hey, look, you can do this, you can be successful, and you can fire your banker and become your own source of financing.
I love it. If somebody wants to go look at the book or get the book, what's the website again?
It's newbankingsolution.com. That's newbankingsolution.com.
We'll make sure we put it in the links below because I think part of our podcast is always just to open everybody's mind about what's possible in the world. You need to understand all the different options that are available. Early this morning I was having a discussion with some team members of ours who are on this journey. Like we guide young entrepreneurs on this journey as they're building their businesses. And I said, step number one is reality check. Reality check what you're really spending in your household business. I always call it like there's a household business that has a P&L. You're either making money in it, you're losing money in it, right? Losing money is credit card debt is stacking. Making money is surplus savings, right? So if you think of your house as a business, then you say, well, what is my budget in that household business? And nobody could ever give me a real number, Mark. Majority of people just don't know that number.
That's
so
right.
So we shift the way they think a little bit about their household checking account as a business household operating account. And that's what your book does, is change everybody's thinking a little bit about how life insurance could play into the equation of what they're building, right, and what they're protecting.
That's one of the tools. I want to be clear. This, even if you decided, hey, this bank on yourself thing, I'm not going to do it, you would get so much out of the book because there's so many things in here that I just wish. And again, David C. Barnett has coached thousands of businesses from start to exit. And he and I worked together to write this book out in terms of just a field guide for folks in that middle to upper middle market space. But if 10% of business owners had a bank on yourself design policy, what do you think would change about the world? What would change about the business space? How many more employees could you bring on? How many more opportunities for real estate could you take advantage of? If it's a race between you and somebody who's got to go through a 45-day mortgage underwriting process, who's going to get that property? It's going to be Rob with his cash value life insurance set aside, ready to roll. It's why I was just reading about this. Is his name Paul Atkins? I need to go find his name again. But the incoming SEC chair, okay, so the Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, coming in here in 2025 as we're recording this, had to disclose his portfolio. Now, this is the stock market king, the chairman of the SEC. Guess what? He's got 54 life insurance policies, whole life insurance policies in his portfolio, representing hundreds of millions of dollars.
54?
Wow. Yeah. So he's bought policies, I'm sure, on himself, but he's also got it on his wife, his kids. I'm sure, I don't know who this guy is in particular. I'm sure he's got some business partners. This is I think a glaring indictment that all of your money should go into the stock market. Where is that written that you should put every last penny into the stock market, especially if you're a business owner? Because what you're saying when you buy stock is, I believe in that business over there more than I believe in my own business. And yeah, you should have some money in the stock market. I certainly do. But you should put some money in a contract that's non-correlated to that stock market that can help give you and your business the best advantage you can get.
I love it. Mark, I'm going to get your book because obviously I think anybody building anything should be looking at just expanding their mind. I appreciate you coming on the Income Flip podcast, Mark. Any final words, anything else that you think about in your book that you're like, Rob, the one thing we didn't cover is this?
I think you've built such an incredible network here. Your real estate network is incredible, and the businesses that you're serving are incredible. I just wish, even just, again, 10% of Americans even knew about this strategy and could put it into their lives at least a little bit to see how it does, and then grow from there. Look at what you were able to accomplish for yourself. I mean, if everyone had a story like that, what would change about the marriage rate? What would change about the life expectancy in our country? It's just incredible to think that one small thing, money is a very powerful tool. And again, those who understand it can benefit from it.
Yeah, the thing that I'll kind of end on this. I remember looking at the policy, or I have multiple policies, and just thinking, wow, what a gift, like upon my demise from this world, right?
I like to think of it as graduating, but go ahead.
The graduating, right? We're graduating, right?
Yeah.
I leave something to the people that I love, and they won't have to worry about a lot of things. And obviously, that just makes a part of our portfolio. But it's very powerful when you think that I don't have to worry about somebody taking taxes out of it. It's just a pretty cool thing. So
it's a big deal. Love it.
It's a big deal.
Love it.
Well, Mark, thank you again. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you.